welcome to the fifth episode of the Connect the Dots NYC podcast. I'm your host, Vedant Vohra, and I am so excited to take you on this journey as we explore different solutions to homelessness. As the creator of the CTD NYC app, I've seen how technology can connect people to vital resources. CTD NYC helps individuals experiencing homelessness in New York City access shelters, food, and healthcare, bridging the gap between them and essential services. It's a powerful example of innovation meeting compassion to tackle the homelessness crisis. Each episode will dive into stories, strategies, and innovations from those on the front lines, whether they're advocates, policymakers, service providers, or individuals with lived experiences. My goal is to spark meaningful conversations and shine a light on the incredible work being done to make housing more accessible for everyone. Thank you for joining me today, and let's get started. Our guest today is Jayme Zwerling. Jayme is a writer, editor, and neighborhood organizer whose creative voice and community-focused work are helping shape the conversation around housing justice in New York City. She currently serves as a neighborhood organizer at Open Hearts Initiative, a nonprofit that amplifies the voices of people experiencing homelessness and promotes housing as a human right. In this role, Jayme brings her talent as a communicator and advocate to support grassroots efforts and community-led change. With a background in writing and media, as well as a growing presence in the nonprofit housing space, she works to bridge stories and systems, making the challenges of housing insecurity more visible and more urgent to address. Jayme's work centers on local action, thoughtful storytelling, and a deep belief in building neighborhoods where everyone has the right to belong. Welcome, Jayme.
That's a beautiful intro. Hi. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. So I want to get started with a little bit of your personal journey and background. Can you tell us a little bit about your path to becoming a neighborhood organizer at Open Hearts Initiative?
Yes. Interestingly, like a lot of stories you've been hearing lately, I'm sure, my journey started, besides being a lifelong New Yorker and always being aware of various housing and homelessness issues. Back in 2020, when we were all trapped inside, I was reading a lot of the news, watching a lot of local stories, and I realized I wanted to get more involved in my community, particularly in the housing and homelessness sector. And I saw a story that I started following, I believe, through the West Side Rag, which, love it or hate it, it's a great resource. And they were talking about a bunch of homeless adult men being temporarily housed at the Lucerne Hotel on the Upper West Side. And people were really upset. And they were putting money towards not helping these men, but instead hiring a lawyer to fight back against housing them temporarily in the neighborhood, period. And there were a group of neighbors who got together and collected necessary personal care items, shampoo, socks, soap, basics. They did chalking in front of the building saying, like, welcome to the neighborhood. We're happy to have you. And I loved that. And I loved that those people were trying to make a difference in the lives of these men. And I was like, that's something I want to do. How can I get involved? And so they started expanding. And once a chapter opened up in Midtown, I got involved with that. And then eventually the job application opened up and I jumped on that. Because once I started volunteering with Open Hearts, I realized how much I loved working on a boots on the ground sort of level in this space. So that's just a quick little background about how I got into neighborhood organizing. It was sort of a lifelong passion for making New York a community, a connected community, which is something we used to have more of. I think you've experienced that probably growing up here. You know your neighborhood. You know the people in your neighborhood. They know your family. They know your dogs. It's a thing. Why can't we have that with everybody? So this is how I kind of came down that road, got involved with OHI, and now we're here.
And you've worked as a writer, editor, and coach. How did storytelling lead you into housing advocacy?
That was my big question. It's like, how can I make this leap? But I knew that I could take my skills as a writer, as an editor, as, again, a storyteller. I like to think of myself as a storyteller. I spend a lot of time doing that. I wanted to take what I had and use it to help others tell their stories. So it was less about me and elevate other voices, which is something I was doing in my last position. I was taking other people's stories and helping them write scripts for online courses, which is not necessarily changing the world, but it's changing a small portion of the world on a person by person basis. So I knew I could take what I had and bring it over to the Open Hearts Initiative and help elevate the voices of the people we're trying to connect with, because that's missing. So I find that the human element, when we talk about homeless people, it's sort of this monolithic concept instead of seeing people as individuals. So how can we get there? And we can get there by sharing their stories, listening, elevating those voices. So yes, that's how I sort of twisted my skills and fit myself into the advocacy space.
What inspired you to transition from media and writing into the nonprofit housing space?
Okay, well, I think some of that I already covered, but to be more specific, I was passionate about the volunteer work I was doing with OHI. So when the job opened up, I was like, yes, how can I take my skills over here and use it to further the work they're already doing? Because they were already in Midtown, the Upper West Side, by the time I got there, they were already expanding. So I was like, what can I add to this wonderful group of people? And I've always enjoyed working as a writer and editor, but I felt it was a lot less stable and like I was spinning my wheels. You know, it was constant. I was doing a lot of freelance work. I was employed by a company, but I still had to constantly just hustle. And it was that hustle where I felt like, okay, but am I doing anything? Am I getting anything done? And as a lifelong New Yorker, I knew that these issues, specifically housing affordability, homelessness, these are near and dear to every New Yorker's heart because we scream about it every day and night. So I finally wanted to do something about it, and I wanted to do it on a more personal level. So this is how I got inspired to jump over. I was already in the process of looking for similar positions when Open Hearts had a position come up. So I was like, perfect. I already know them. I love the work they do. I'm passionate about it. Let's go for it. You know, let's take the leap. And I really had to try to be as convincing as possible that I could do this job, having almost no experience working in the nonprofit sector. But here I am.
And you've touched on this a little, but what values or experiences have shaped the way you approach community organizing?
Mm. Okay. This one, I don't know if everybody knows this. Have you ever taken an improv class?
Not yet, not yet.
Okay. The thing they will tell you is that the principle, a basic principle of improv is it's yes and. Whatever anyone says to you, if the scene starts and they go, oh my God, the boat's sinking, you don't go, no, we're on the beach. What are you talking about? You go, yes, and I have a bucket, you know, and you play off whatever they're giving you. So for me, the way I approach community organizing is yes and to everything. I don't want to say no, but I'm always going, oh, you want to do this? Yes, we'll do that. And I'll get it started tomorrow and we'll get the volunteers on it. So I feel like anytime somebody wants to do something, yes, and them. If they want to do a clothing drive, yes, and we'll do it at this shelter for these people, and it'll work because of these reasons. So that's a good example of something I'm doing right now. There actually is a clothing drive happening, and it was sort of a tight timeline. But I said, yes, why am I going to say no? Let's do it. I know that these women need summer clothes, summer shoes. It's a thing people don't think about. And I know we can get enough donations in a 2-week time frame and get this off the ground and get things going. And so as far as I can tell, it's happening. We're going to be donating clothes on Tuesday at a women's shelter and just having them do a sort of free store. So that's exciting. So whenever somebody comes to you with an idea, yes and them. Always have a yes and approach. Community is the key to everything. Compassion is key. Education is key. So we get there with greater visibility, which we achieve by saying yes and jumping at every opportunity. That's kind of how I like to operate internally, if that answers the question.
And I want to focus a little bit now on your role at Open Hearts Initiative. And so, what does your day to day work look like as a neighborhood organizer at OHI?
And that's a good question because when I tell people I'm a neighborhood organizer, what does that even mean? And I remember, I think during the Obama candidacy, he had worked as a neighborhood organizer. And I remember saying, like, okay, I get the concept. I know he's like organizing people, but to do what and about what? And so what does that look like every day? It involves a lot of emails. Emailing back and forth, emailing our volunteers, trying to get people to buy into certain tasks, or seeing if anybody wants to take the lead on something, or, hey, we have this need. Does anyone want to help us fill it? It's also emailing partner organizations. So half the job is making connections with local organizations, your community. But specific to me, besides the emailing, I've taken it upon myself. I came in and I said, I want to improve your social media presence and your reach. We need to get the message out there about what we're doing. And again, to kind of destigmatize homelessness and the idea of what a homeless person is. So a lot of my time is social media work, and also researching community organizations and resources in the area. So it's a lot of being on a laptop, being on a computer, researching, emailing, updating your social media, reposting, crafting, and not just shooting out like tweets or threads or Instagram posts that are really low. I don't want to say low level, like a little bit of work. I try to craft very simple posts that show you what we're doing and explain it as clearly as possible. So I'm not just like tweeting my thoughts all day, which I'm sure is what people think social media is. It's like, no, how can we show people what we're doing and get our message out there? So a lot of my day is in our shared office space, but on a good day, it's me in a storage facility, putting things on a cart, getting them into an Uber, getting to another facility, and making sure we have things for care kit events where we're handing out personal care items, shampoo, soap, socks, etc., or clothing for clothing drives. And I know the other neighborhood organizer, Caroline, a lot of her day is running around, going to different events. So for her, it's probably less computer time. And for me, I'm more stable at the moment.
And how does OHI work to elevate the voices of people experiencing homelessness?
That is a really good question. Our goal is to always put the people with lived experience first, front and center. It's to reach compassionate and often wary neighbors by encouraging participation and interaction between housed and unhoused people. So the only way to really break the stigma is to not only make sure that our social media presence or our newsletters or anything going out has stories, shares those perspectives, and then to get people in a room together or at a party in the park or at an event. So really it's sharing your lived experience, but interacting with your neighbors that may be housed and compassionate or wary of the entire homeless community, but they're still curious. I mean, that's really breaks down a lot of the stigma and helps homeless individuals become more visible in a way that is not stereotypical. So social posts need to have quotes from unhoused or formerly unhoused neighbors, because it's not just about what we think, it's about the actual experience. And I'm working towards that right now. It's, hard because not everybody wants to come forward and share their experience, but plenty of people do. So it's just a matter of curating the right quote for the right post and making sure that it gets out there. So we always try to center the people with the lived experience over our own opinions and experiences.
And are there any projects or campaigns at OHI you're especially proud of?
Oh, yes. I wish I could say some of this was stuff I have gotten started, but a lot of these things already existed when I got here, and that was what already made me so thrilled to be a part of OHI. We have a lot of recurring programming that was set up, like the English language learners program, where people can come and improve their English skills. And right now, it's a lot of I think we have a lot of Spanish speakers, some French speakers, and I think there was a third language we have since run into, and I can't remember what it was, but we're working on connecting everyone with a resource so that they can improve their skills. So that's more of a class or a workshop. We also have what I you can call it the language exchange or the intercambio. I like calling it the intercambio because it's just a conversational language group, which is a lot more fun and relaxed and not about instruction, but like we both know the language, we just need to brush up on our social language skills. And then there's also homelessness, living from experience or learning from experience, excuse me. And that is a monthly, like casual discussion group that happens on the Upper East Side for now. And it's a really great group of people that come together, both housed and unhoused, to discuss issues that are in the media right now, or we can discuss ways I was just there last weekend, and one of the great things was what's still a great deal in New York. And that's one of the casual things. Like, it doesn't always have to be that deep. Sometimes it's like, what was your experience living in a safe haven versus a congregate shelter? And that's a much heavier conversation sometimes, but then also it's like, where can you still find a good deal in New York? And I got some good tips, and we all shared our tips. I was like, if you want one meal that's under $20, go to a food cart. It's the best deal in town. And people were mentioning various things they do across the city. So HLFE, homelessness learning from experience, is a great opportunity to meet your neighbors. And they are your neighbors, and they might be unhoused now, or they may have been previously unhoused. But if you're interested and you want to meet people and you really want to learn about their experiences or just have a conversation, I would recommend looking into HLFE. And then the last thing, I just got a taste of our computer literacy workshop, which is also a recurring program. It's, I think, once a month. And you just go. And if you even have, everyone now has like the basic amount of skills to operate a cell phone or a computer. And if you can do that, you can help people. So show up, help people figure out how to use Google Maps, how to send an email. I think it's really great that we have programs that are all about not just building skills, but building community. And I think that's always the tie-in. Like, what can we do to help people get the skills they need to survive in New York City? But also, how can we connect as neighbors? So I'm really proud of those recurring programs, even though I had nothing to do with starting them. I think it's just, they're doing a great job.
And you talked about this a bit earlier, but I was wondering if you could touch a bit more on your role as a bridge between storytelling and advocacy.
So the goal for me is to find out how to best appeal to people who aren't already co-signing our mission. It's like, what language can I use to get people to maybe change their perspective, or not even change it, but consider a different one? So using those true experiences, different perspectives, showing the full scope of housing and homelessness, it really shouldn't be a bridge. It should just be what advocacy looks like. So you can throw facts at people, but until you tell them, like, oh, here are some stats are great, till you tell them about like actual lived experience, and you're going to hear me say that over and over again, lived experience, it really won't, I think, move the needle for anyone. So I think that's why storytelling and advocacy really do need to go hand in hand. And I hope to be that bridge, and I hope to bring that to people. So look for our social media. Hopefully we have some stuff coming out where I'll be sharing some of those perspectives for people.
And I'll definitely look forward to that. But
Yeah.
on that topic of storytelling and communication, I want to ask how can writing, whether in the form of essays, articles, or like you said, social media, be a tool for housing justice?
Mm. Okay. Well, first of all, if you can't communicate effectively, your message will not reach people. And I know, I feel like communication is taken for granted these days. And that's why there's so much noise and not enough. What is effective messaging? How do we reach people? And you have to kind of consider, okay, what am I saying and how am I saying it? Each type of media reaches a different group. So who you're targeting should determine which outlet you pursue. So Instagram is great for video, which will obviously reach a wider array of people who may not have the capacity, ability, or patience to read an article. Like, I love a well-worded essay in The Atlantic, but not everybody's going to read one, The Atlantic, or two, an essay, even if it was in the Post, you know? So it's really like, okay, can we use video to reach more people? But also, who is this video? What are the age groups that we're reaching on something like Instagram versus YouTube versus, Threads or Blue Sky? It's really hard to know where to be these days. So I think writing is important. It is definitely a tool for housing justice. I think it's also, you have to figure out how to use that writing and where to use it to most effectively reach people. And I think the shorter, the better. I'm a little long-winded. And, and I think the more precise you can be with your words, the more precise and concise, the better you'll be in terms of reaching people. So, again, love a strongly worded, long essay bringing in various data points from the Atlantic, but not everybody's reading that.
And what advice would you give to people who want to use their voices to make change but don't know where to start?
And that's a great question, because I think there are a lot of people that go, "Oh, I see all this stuff happening. What can I do?" First thing you do, since we have the internet, I would use it. Look for organizations that already exist in your community. You're never going to be starting from zero. There's probably already somebody out there working on what you're interested in. So find an organization that aligns with your values and just get involved in some way. Whether that's, okay, they're doing a rally, I'll join them at this rally, or they need people to sign this petition. It doesn't have to be you showing up in person. There are plenty of ways to contribute remotely. There are options for everyone now to participate in advocacy. So you just have to find an organization that aligns with your values, see what they're doing. And if you see a change that needs to be made, don't be afraid to say something. But always make sure you know what you're talking about. The key is know what you're saying, have your stats ready. Even though I said stats can sometimes bore people, it is important to inform the work that you do and how you put your message together. And remember that if you're starting to get involved in something, whether it's housing advocacy or women's rights or voting rights, the most important story isn't always your own. So remember to not always center yourself, unless you are one of the people affected by this. If it's an issue that is affecting you and you are affected by, obviously, time to center yourself. But if it's something you're passionate about, make sure that it's for an altruistic reason and it's not all about you. But I guess it's advocacy. We'll take anybody.
And I want to shift towards what we're advocating about, which is homelessness and housing. And so, in your opinion, what are some of the biggest misconceptions the public has about homelessness?
Oh, okay. I've been, obviously I've lived here my entire life. So I got to see New York through, I mean, my memory probably starts about 1987, 1988. So I have a long view of Manhattan specifically. And the one thing that hasn't changed from the time I could remember to now is the negative view of homeless individuals. So the idea that it can't happen to everybody and it's something that they brought on themselves is really pervasive. And I find that so interesting, because I feel like our country is now in a time where it could happen to anybody. And I feel like people are feeling that more. We're getting a little more activated about this issue because we know, hey, this is pressing. But there's still that idea that if you are homeless, you are dangerous, you are uneducated, you are unemployed, when that is often not the case. You may be highly educated. There are people with college degrees who have nowhere to live. There are people that are not dangerous. They just don't have a job right now. Or they do have a job, but it's not enough to cover housing, especially in a city like New York. So there are all these things where people just are very casually dismissive of unhoused people and make these assumptions about what got them there. And that's not always the truth. And it usually isn't, based on my experience.
And how do you see storytelling helping to shift public narratives or policy around unhoused individuals?
Mm. Well, here's my hope that the more stories we share, and these lived perspectives that we share, that eventually this party line of they're scary, they're dangerous, they're this, they're that, it'll start to shift. Because if you see more people who are like, oh, I was a teacher and I retired and then that money didn't hold out, or I did, there are plenty of different professions and people that I've met that have ended up in a shelter for one reason or another. And so I think, again, sharing those stories will shift the narrative and potentially shift the policy. Like, the more that we get the public to realize that these stereotypes aren't true, the needle will move. And when neighbors start to connect with each other, when they listen to each other, that's when change happens. The catch is getting people to listen, but once you have someone's ear and once you've piqued their interest, we can start to get things moving. And that's the hope.
And what do you wish more people understood about the connection between housing and dignity?
Mm. Housing is the foundation for everything else in your life. It is the foundation on which the rest of your life is built. So when you don't have stable housing, it can easily rob you of your dignity, not because it's shameful, But because you can't access things like a bathroom, a shower, feminine hygiene products, or laundry services. So lack of housing can really force people into potentially mortifying situations. Think, for instance, you're someone who has to use a bathroom but can't, or a woman who doesn't have any recourse to find like feminine hygiene products. You can't just throw a sweatshirt around your waist and wait until the bell rings at 3 p.m. or the office day ends. You're stuck. You are trapped in your body with nowhere to go, and that's when your dignity gets robbed from you, because we don't have resources to just protect people's basic dignity. And if we make housing affordable and available and accessible to everyone, we'll see less of this, and when you have that dignity, that self-respect, the ability to take care of yourself, it can really change everything. You can turn your whole life around just by having privacy and the resources you need. Just basics, a toothbrush, a shower, laundry facilities. It really can shift everything for a person.
And are there any policies or community practices you think are particularly effective at preventing homelessness?
Housing. The easy answer is housing, because homelessness is generally a housing problem. It's having enough truly affordable housing, and that's the key way to prevent homelessness, which we're dealing with in New York. It's a concern we all have, whether we are owners, renters, and most New York is a rental city. And I did not know that was abnormal until I left New York, and I was like, oh wow, it's not normal to worry about your rent constantly increasing and renting. This is not common in a lot of places. So beyond that, there are a lot of things that might trigger homelessness for someone, like losing a job or an unexpected health issue. We all know healthcare is not really, even if you have it, it doesn't cover everything. So if there was enough affordable housing, losing your job, unexpected healthcare costs, you would not end up on the street. You would not end up in a shelter. You would just have your home and be able to deal with the problems as they came. And not everybody has that luxury, and it's upsetting. Tenant protections, rent stabilization, anything that'll help people from getting priced out of their neighborhoods or kicked out of their homes. This is, again, like my family has been here since since my grandparents lived with my great grandparents in the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, all in apartments that they shared bedrooms. It was tight, and they were making a go of it. And I think they were hoping that ideally things would be better for me by now. And certainly I'm not living with three generations in one apartment. So I have, crossed that threshold. But there's the concern that we're heading back to that. We're heading back to where we were at the turn of the 20th century. And I just hope that we can work on increasing tenant protections, stabilizing the rent, fingers crossed. Beyond that, safe haven shelters. I love safe haven shelter. It's I think it's called a low barrier for access shelter, but that's just because you don't have to go to an intake shelter first, which is usually congregate, and people do find those to be a little scary, which I don't doubt. And safe havens will just have you talk to an intake worker, and you'll get placed as soon as a bed is available. And you do have a private or shared room. So again, safe havens, I think, are an effective way to convince people that there is a safe shelter for you. Let's get you out of the street in the first place, give you that foundation. But beyond that, also housing vouchers, rental assistance, a way to, so safe havens, rental assistance, vouchers, that's a way to exit homelessness more quickly. And the vouchers can help prevent homelessness when people are already at risk. So if you think it's going to be potentially risking homelessness or street homelessness, housing vouchers are the way to go. And I think minimum wage needs to keep pace with the cost of living, which it has not. So all of these things. I mean, it all begins with housing and it ends with housing. And then from there, once we can get everybody in a stable place, then we can work on minimum wage. But until then, yeah, let's just set the baseline.
And I want to hone in on some intersectional insights. And so how does your work touch on issues of race, gender, and religion in the housing space?
And that's important because you can't ignore race, religion, gender often. and we have an informal reading and discussion group that meets monthly. It's called Housing Justice is Racial Justice. And I think I've participated in a couple of those, and it's a space where OHI members or non-members, if you ever want to join, learn together about the intersections of housing justice and racial justice. Is exactly what it sounds like. And we talk about the roots of the housing and homelessness crisis in policies driven by systemic racism. Because, I mean, in this country specifically, it's unavoidable. We we live in a system that was, there is systemic racism. We cannot avoid that. So how does that affect people accessing housing? And that's a lot of what they discuss in the Housing Justice is Racial Justice monthly group. So I think that's one way that we specifically touch on it. We actually get into the conversation about it. But doing the work itself means acknowledging how race and gender may affect a person's ability to access care or be considered even a reliable narrator of their own story. I found that religion has yet to come up, thankfully. That's more of a personal issue. I think it's yet to come up, though we do partner with houses of worship because they offer free space and sometimes have congregants who are experiencing homelessness themselves. And they also want to participate in supporting their communities. So the one way religion does come up is that they are generally a force for good in this. They are trying to do the work we're doing by reaching out to the community and supporting their parishioners, their neighborhood. It's but no conflict there. And I haven't seen how religion has affected housing, but that is interesting when you think about what does that mean for someone who has dietary restrictions or a schedule that they have to keep or lights that they can't turn on after 5 p.m. on a Friday. It's very interesting. And I haven't heard any of those stories yet, but I'd be curious to ask around and see if anyone has dealt with those hurdles. And now you've got me thinking about like all these people I can talk to and ask questions of.
And what role do you think hyperlocal organizing plays in solving what feels like a massive structural problem?
Yes. Yeah. What you would hope that we'd be working top down on this one, but OHI's approach has always been grounded in the belief that building connections between housed and unhoused neighbors and advocating for policy change, they all go hand in hand. It's like meet your neighbors, advocate for policy change. All of these things have to go together. It's not just fighting policy, it's about understanding the why and who you're doing it for and what the actual needs are, not just what you believe the needs are. So homelessness, I think, is a policy issue. It's not a personal flaw. And therefore, ending it requires changing the systems that got us here in the first place. So, house New Yorkers have an essential role to play in pushing for that policy change. We're the voices that are going to be heard. Ironically, they're listening to house people about homelessness issues because we are considered the reliable narrators. So, it is on us to do the work. And at the same time, our power is in doing this work is that we're doing it in our own backyard. Our voices hold the most weight in our own communities. I can't go to Chicago and tell people like, oh yeah, like here's how you should be doing it. No, like the power is being here in your home and going, I live here. I know you live around the corner from me, or there's a shelter around the corner, or there are homeless people. Everyone in your neighborhood. So doing this work where you live, where you work, it's the most effective. And that's when our advocacy is grounded in real person-to-person connections with neighbors experiencing homelessness. So hyper-local is the way to go. Our policy on advocacy, excuse me, our policy on our advocacy work within policy both informs and is informed by our chapter's neighborhood level work. So the things that people talk about in their chapter meetings or what we bring to chapter meetings, it's a lot of give and take, and we get a lot of feedback, which is really helpful, which is why our volunteers are kind of the heart and soul of what we do. And I feel like things are built from the ground up. Just like a house, you need to set the foundation first. So especially when our federal government is in flux, local government is an important place to take action. Especially in New York, it's a little more predictable. We know, things change, but they're kind of always the same in New York, regardless of who's in charge. We know the systems we can use to advocate for our neighbors and for the causes that are important to us. So when you focus your efforts more locally, I find that more things get done, even policy-wise. You can actually see change happening, or you can change someone's day, someone's week, someone's year, and you see it. And this doesn't mean we get to ignore the the larger system. We can't just go, oh, I'm going to curl up here in New York where it's safe and ignore everything that's happening outside of here. But it just means that by focusing our scope, we can get more done. And then we can worry about the bigger picture once we've gotten that foundation laid. And there are plenty of organizations that focus on the federal government, and I sincerely applaud their fortitude. I'm a local girl. I'm going to keep my focus a little narrow right now and see what I can do here in the city for the people I know.
And looking a bit forward, what gives you hope when it comes to the fight for housing justice?
I think my hope is when I see the people I'm working with, when I see volunteers showing up, when I see other organizations doing the same work and advocating not just for themselves, but for other people. So humanity gives me hope. Surprisingly, there are days when I'm like, we're doomed, but but usually when I show up to an event or a chapter meeting, or I'm walking around the city and I see people doing things for their neighborhood, I go, okay, we're gonna get through this, we're gonna be all right. I have hope for the future of housing justice.
And how do you envision your work and OHI's work evolving over the next few years?
Hmm. Hopefully, we're going to continue to grow our existing chapters with more events, more frequent events, more recurring events, and potentially strengthening our volunteer members' leadership skills so they can take more actions on their own and they can take the lead. And I won't always have to suggest or push. It'll be a lot of people coming forward and saying, hey, let's do blank on such and such day, which is already happening. But I think kind of supporting that work to be more confident about suggesting ideas and pushing forward and taking the lead, because not everybody wants to do that. I myself can be hesitant sometimes to step up or speak up, but it feels good when you do. It's hard to do in a group, but but so I hope that we're growing our chapters, we're growing membership leadership, we're adding more chapters in parts of the city where we don't yet have as much of a presence. I hope we kind of just expand our network. And then I like that the one thing that won't change is that our work will always be grounded in hands-on interpersonal opportunities. And I feel like the people are what matter. So our work will always be grounded in hands-on stuff, interpersonal communication between neighbors. I would love that to remain the foundation of our work beyond expanding across the city and increasing the amount of things that we can do.
And for my last question, if listeners want to get involved, either with OHI or in their own neighborhoods, where should they begin?
That is also a great question, and it's an easy one to answer. You can just visit our website and fill out a form to join a chapter. So for anyone listening, it's the Open Hearts, or not the www.openheartsinitiative.org/volunteer. If you want to join a chapter, if that's too much, you can join our mailing list and see how things get done from there, because we're always updating all our chapters on what they're doing. But really, joining a chapter is the best way and most immediate way to get involved. You can attend a chapter meeting, you can sign up to volunteer, and really our events that we plan generally only take an hour or two out of your day. So not counting commute, it's pretty easy, low time commitment, and you immediately are connecting with your neighbors, meeting other like-minded people who want to advocate for better housing policy and make our neighborhoods more like a neighborhood, more like a connected community, what neighborhoods should be. So that's the best way to get involved. Go to our website, openheartsinitiative.org/volunteer. Just see what we're about. And I hope to see some people joining. Maybe anyone who listens to this, join us.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciated this conversation.
No, this was great. Thank you so much. You asked really insightful questions, and I hope I gave some good answers.